What is up, guys? Welcome back to OverTakes. This is Misfit. We are going to be doing a Week 29 recap of sorts. We're not going to dive into the matches. A lot of them didn't really mean anything. A lot of teams are kind of playing, testing the waters out, trying different stuff. But we're going to talk about a little bit about a couple of the matches, and then we're going to dive into the final standings and how the playoffs are going to shake down and get you guys ready for next week when we start those up. First, before we dive into that, thanks to everybody out there on YouTube. Thank you very much for all of your likes, all of your subscribes, all of the views you've been giving. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. Everybody out there in podcast land, thank you very much for all the support you've been giving me. If you're new on YouTube, please hit a like, hit a subscribe, hit that alert bell to get alerts for when I have new content coming up. Going to have a lot coming up in the next week. We got a lot of things to talk about, playoffs, all kinds of different things. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to do the playoffs. If we do, kind of a quick one, recapping each round, or we go over the whole weekend. Haven't figured it quite out yet. Tell me what you guys like to see, and we'll go from there. I kind of have an idea of what I want to do. I just want to get some input from you guys. All right, so let's, without further ado, get into Week 29. Okay, so we had the final week of the regular season. So the season's been long, guys. We finally finished up the regular season. Definitely not in the way we were thinking about it at the beginning of the season. I would like to go over the teams and stuff like that, where we had them placed to start, and then my thoughts on my side. Since I did have, if you guys are new, I had a partner, Cal, on the show, but we did our rankings, but we did it broken down into the way the divisions were, not the way they kind of got separated and all that kind of stuff to start. So it'd be kind of weird to try and go, okay, this is what I got right and what I got wrong. We can generalize it and go over some of that stuff. But since we had it broken down in Atlantic and Pacific, it really doesn't, there's no merit to it, because we figured, Seoul and Hangzhou and Shanghai would be playing San Francisco and the Gladiators and the Valiant and all that kind of stuff. So there's no connotation as to how it would have shaken down if they all played together compared to our rankings. I mean, we could go off previous power rankings, which I've got some right and some wrong. Some teams came up, some teams went down. The whole kind of surprises, both ways on that too. Whether teams, did better than I thought or worse than I thought. But we will definitely do a recap of the end of the season and kind of figure out how teams placed. But let's talk about the last week of the season. We had matches on Friday and Saturday and Sunday this week. They were actually score-wise better than normal. We usually get a lot more 3-0s, and Sunday was actually pretty decent. Even starting, we'll go down the whole schedule. Top to bottom, Sunday was pretty good. Usually we get kind of weak games on Sunday, but we'll recap the week here. So Friday, we had Vancouver 3-0ing Boston. No surprise there. Florida 3-1 over the Gladiators. The Mayhem looked decent enough. The Gladiators are a little off. I thought the Gladiators would take this one. I thought Florida might be trying more stuff out and, just kind of messing around with things. Then Saturday, we had the Spark 3-0, the Seoul Dynasty, in a normal Seoul match where they didn't look terrible, but they still lost 3-0. After the weekend previous, where they 3-0'd everybody, it kind of is normal for Seoul. It seems like the 3-0, they're like the Atlanta of APAC, in a way. They're even, in general, they're kind of on the same footing, maybe a little bit better. Hard to say. I'm not going to get into the generalizing. Just quickly honest, I'm not getting into the generalizing of APAC's better than NA, or APAC is worse than NA, or any of that stuff. The teams haven't played each other, period. There's no definitive, well, this is better than that. I think Hangzhou's better than Atlanta Gladiators, and you can get into that, but it doesn't make sense. There's more teams in NA, double the teams, essentially. So yeah, you're going to have a lot more bad teams in NA. It's just the law of averages. It's just the way it works out. There's going to be a closer gap between teams in APAC because there's less teams. But we're going to definitely dive into who eye test wise, I think is going to do well and all that. That'll be coming up next week. But back to the schedule. We have the Excelsior beat London 3-1. No surprise there. Next up, the Shock take care of the Justice in Decay's debut 3-0. Dallas works the Toronto Defiant 3-1. The Gladiators take a crucial match against Atlanta 3-1. And then the Valiant 3-0 Vancouver. Sunday, we had Seoul squeaking out one against London. London, obviously, they had to figure something out at some point, playing them 3 times in 2 weeks, but they still lost 3-2. Then back to NA, we have Paris beating Dallas 3-1. The Shock in a really close match beating Atlanta 3-2. Shock didn't look that great. Atlanta looked better than normal. And the final battle of LA for 2020 goes to the Los Angeles Gladiators 3-2 in a really good match. That one was pretty fun. We had a lot of good stuff going on in there. The one match, the Shock looked weird. I'm not going to lie here. They did not look at their best this week. Just a quick touch on this match. I mean, as of right now, I don't like the way the Shock look when they're playing Monkey. I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe it's because they haven't been practicing it. They haven't played a lot of it in the past. I mean, the last 2 years, you're not getting a lot of Monkey, but they just didn't look as good as they normally do. Atlanta even beat them on Kings Row, which just a side note, which usually doesn't happen, but San Francisco kept their 19-map win streak alive on Hanamura. They're undefeated on that. So, I mean, there are some takeaways from this match. I think Atlanta, if they get their head in the game and they're coordinated and they play well and they don't get tilted, it seems like they get tilted kind of easily at times. Yeah, and they work some wacky stuff, but you know what? They can hang with anybody. And, you know, in this match, they played decently. They gave the Shock, took the Shock to 5 maps. Not too many teams have done that recently. Yeah, the Shock, I mean, coming off, they looked marginal against Philly. They lost 3-0, but, I mean, they didn't look like they got their doors blown off or anything like that. And this one, they looked the same, kind of. You know, they just look kind of meh. I don't know if it's mental state or we're looking forward to the playoffs. I mean, they're not even going to be playing in the playoffs for the first round or 2. So, you know, their first match is on September 5th. So, I mean, they're not even playing until Sunday, a week from. So they're going to get like almost a 2-week break. I mean, obviously next week they're going to be grinding a little bit harder, probably, from this point on right now. We're at Thursday. I'm recording this on. So, they just looked, I'd like to see them shore up some stuff on their, Monkey comps. I think they need to work on that because from what I've seen, seeing other people talk that, the casters and things like that on Plat Chat and various other things, it's looking like Monkey and Zarya or Diva, the kind of stuff we saw this weekend. And with the Sombra going on with the EMP and possibly Tracer or Ashe, I guess is what people are thinking right now. But we'll see what happens on this patch, if they're going to run a main tank or if they're going to run Roadhog or because he's overpowered right now on ladder. And these guys are going to run Widow. And speaking of that and other things, holy crap, Ons. Let's just talk this dude for a minute. There were times when he was just owning the Reign. He is unbelievable. I mean, I knew he was good before, but just really focusing in and watching him play and watching a little bit on the replay viewer and stuff like that, this guy is unbelievable. An unbelievable hit scan. He plays. He's known for his Widow, but his Ashe is filthy as well. So, I mean, that's something to take in consideration. I don't know if they're going to want to play something without him in there right now. Yeah, you can run Striker on Tracer. See, that's the thing. I mean, you got backups and things like that, but a lot of this match came down to Ons taking care of business against Atlanta. And Atlanta can take a lot away from this. They struggled. They lost to the Gladiators this weekend, which was a big match, which gave them a lower seed. but, it gave them the 7 seed instead of the 6 seed. And the same can be said about the Gladiators not taking care of business. They could have potentially been the 5 seed if they had beaten the Valiant. They just needed to go 2-1 this weekend, but they failed to do that. Atlanta has the potential to make some noise in this. If they have a week and a half to get their stuff together, and you get to pick your opponents, all that kind of stuff when you get into the seeded matches. I mean, yeah, they're not at the point of the top 4, which is Florida, San Francisco, the Fusion, and Paris. But they still have advantages, even though they're in a lower bracket. Plus, they're into the double elimination, so that also works in their favor. So if they do have a slip up, they can potentially rebound from that. I kind of am hoping that they get things worked out, because they did not look, like I said, they did not look bad, but there's some things they can work on. So moving on from the schedule for the week, I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. APAC, we've had our final standings, for a bit, and it was pretty much solidified. It was solidified on Saturday after Hangzhou took care of Seoul. So we have Shanghai 1, Guangzhou 2, New York 3, the Spark 4, Seoul 5, Chengdu 6, and London 7. So that's the APAC final standings, and we're going to dive into a little bit of that. Some of the takeaways that we got from this week. There really wasn't a lot that I pulled away, except for Seoul is weird as usual. It seems like they can't really get a hold of beating a really good team or a decent team. I think Hangzhou's kind of on their level. I thought they were a little bit lower, but they've leveled up a little bit. We wanted to see them do a little bit better, and they've taken care of business. They beat Seoul 3-0. They got the 5 seed, and that puts them in a good position for the bracket. They have their choice of picking the winner of the Chengdu London match or Seoul, which I mean it's going to most likely be Chengdu or Seoul, I'm assuming. Well, Seoul definitely, but Chengdu, we'll get into that a little bit more. But they leveled up a little bit, and they got their spot. I thought Seoul might have taken that from them, but I thought it was going to be closer than it was score-wise. I mean, Seoul had their chances. Profit played well again, but to no avail. Once again, relying too much on the carry potential here, players and stuff like that. Shanghai had the week off. So did Guangzhou. So they were automatically in anyway at 1 and 2. So we have that set. NA, let's jump over to that. So the final seedings for NA after all the middle mishmash matches that had to get played. We had Philly 1, San Francisco 2, Paris 3, Florida 4. The Valiant take the 5 spot. The Gladiators take the 6 spot. Atlanta's 7, Dallas is 8, Toronto 9, Houston 10, Vancouver 11, Washington 12, Boston 13. The last one, obviously, we all knew that. The last couple. So that's the final standings for the NA region. Then we had our selection show, the normal picking of teams for, and then this is for the play-in matches for NA, because obviously Chengdu and London were the 2 bottom teams, and it's working the same way. And then we'll get into picking teams in the next round, the second round, I guess it would be, of the APAC bracket. But NA, the first round playoff matches, single elimination. We have Houston versus Boston, Washington versus Vancouver. It kind of played out how I thought it was going to. The team's picking, obviously, Houston's going to pick Boston, which is fantastic because we're going to have a meaningful Clown Fiesta. Hopefully it's not the 10-match fiasco that they had at the beginning of the season where Boston won. But it's still playoffs. It's still going to be interesting. It's still going to be fun. And then we have Washington taking on Vancouver. No surprises there. It kind of was basically Houston was the highest seed, so they had their pick of Boston or Washington, and obviously they took Boston because Washington's not terrible, but they're weird scary now with Decay. So they left Vancouver with that. So that's what we're looking at as far as the playoff brackets go. It's going to shake down, and then we'll do a quick go over the schedule, and then we'll talk about this stuff next week. I'm going to talk about a couple of things before we go that we're going to be doing moving forward in the next week, besides talking playoffs. So NA bracket looks like this. Like we were just saying, Houston, Boston, and then we have Washington, Vancouver on September 3rd, which is a Thursday. And then next day, I'm sure we'll have a selection show. Gladiators play the first match against whoever's left. Atlanta and Toronto is the other team that's in this. They didn't have to play in. They're just they're below the line, so they had to get picked. Or they will get picked. So it's either be Houston, Boston, Washington, Vancouver taking on the Gladiators, Atlanta, or Dallas on Friday. And then we move into the top four, picking their teams: Philadelphia, Florida, Paris, and San Francisco. Now, these brackets are working out kind of interesting because Philadelphia and Florida are in the top, and then San Francisco and Paris are in the bottom, kind of setting us up for a really good NA top two. You know, barring any kind of upsets and stuff, which can happen, especially when the meta changes like this. You never know what's going to happen. But it's going to set us up for some good play here. Even in the earlier rounds, I always look forward to playoffs in any sport. You talk NHL, NBA, baseball, football. The level of play goes up. The stakes are higher. All the cliches you want to use. I think NA's setting up to look really good. The Asia playoffs are going to look good too. Like I said, we'll go over it real quick. We have Chengdu, London, and then the odd team is Seoul. So the next round will be New York and Hangzhou picking either Seoul or Chengdu. And then we move into the next round where we have Shanghai and Guangzhou get to pick, and then the other two teams are left. Now, mind you, these are double limbs too. So we do have a losers bracket and that kind of whatnot and what have you. So there's potential for some interesting things going on. You know, you could have a team like Florida loses right off the bat, goes on a losers bracket, makes a run. Don't know. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. All right, before we end today's episode, that's going to do it for the recap. I just want to go over some stuff really quick. The matches were okay, all that. Some of them mattered, some of them didn't, and I just want to dive into get ready for the playoffs and stuff like that. Put the regular season behind us and start moving into the postseason. But I'm going to be doing some things this week where we're going to talk some awards. You know, it's that time of year. MVP voting is going on right now. I'm going to give my top three. We'll talk about that, and then I'll give you my favorite my MVP vote, and then we'll talk some other stuff that I had going on: rookies of the year, comeback players. These are on a couple of different episodes. They're going to be shorter episodes, more suited for YouTube, but we're going to do some of that, and then of course we'll hit you with some playoff previews, and then like I said earlier in the program, today I haven't decided on how I wanted to do the playoffs. I might break it down round by round, which feels better to me in that way. And then we just wrap up the whole weekend when the brackets start going down, because we're going to have a lot of stuff going on. We have, the 2 prelim matches, 3 actually, and then it's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about in one day. And all the matches mean something, so I just want to get something out there to discuss this, get the discussion rolling with you guys. And, talk playoffs. That's where we're at. And we're going to talk some awards before that. That's going to do it, guys. Thank you very much for joining me. Everybody out there on YouTube, once again, thank you very much. Thanks for all your support. It's greatly appreciated. Everybody out there in podcast land, thank you again as well. That is going to do it for this one. This is Misfit. I'm out. Everybody stay safe. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you on the next one.